Welcome to the Point Out Loud Women Trailblazers podcast, Series 4, on leading change in education and community engagement, brought to you by the UWSP Center for Equity, Development, and Leadership. Here at UW Stevens Point, we believe that transformative change begins with leaders who are passionate about education, health, and sustainability.
This series dives deep into the stories and insights of changemakers from all walks of life. Educators, advocates, and innovators who are shaping the future of our communities.
As Malala once said, when the world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. Let's celebrate those voices and inspire action.
Coming up next, we have the one and the only Deanna Singh. She challenges me every time I'm standing next to her, reading her words, listening to her speak. She's going to reveal how she uses small steps to work through a cycle with people that I call the push to the hug. She says everything's solvable. Listen in.
Welcome, Deanna. How are you doing today?
Hello. It's so lovely to be with you both.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you. I'd love if you could start with just telling us a little bit about yourself and your backstory.
Absolutely. So for me, it's hard to pick a place to start because I feel like every day is a new part of the story. But I think some things that are really important to like who I am and how I like to show up in the world. One very important thing is that I come from a really interesting background. My parents met each other and decided to get married after knowing each other for just 3 months. What makes that more spectacular than just the short period of time they knew each other was the fact that they came from very different backgrounds. So my dad is from Punjab, India. My mom is her family's originally from McGee, Mississippi, by way of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But they did not speak the same language, let alone have the same religion, eat the same food, have the same upbringing. And so I often tell people that much of who I am today has to do with the fact that as a child, I watched these two people from very different backgrounds create a bridge to one another. And as their eldest child, it was my job to test it, to see like how strong it was, to see how I could bring other people on it with me, to see like what worked and what didn't work. And that really, that sense of our differences aren't something we have to be afraid of, but really can be something that we can use to get to know each other better and even find love has been instrumental in the way that I see the world.
What an inspiring backstory. I love that. That's so cool.
Thanks.
What inspired your journey into leadership, inclusion, and social entrepreneurship?
So for me, there was something that my parents really instilled in us at a very young age. And the way that my father spoke about it is he would say, it's never good enough to measure yourself just by how you are doing by yourself, right? Your measurement of how well things are going should really be based on how things are going for not just yourself, but all those around you. That's really the measure of success. And so I think that lesson, and my mom reinforced that in literally every single step she ever took and every decision that she ever made. And so I think that philosophy and that idea really resonated with me at a very young age. And so the idea that I could, and I was fortunate enough and quite honestly, like privileged enough to be able to have an amazing educational background, access to all of these different resources, some, as some people would say, maybe some talents, right? Some skills that if I could use them to exponentially like make other people's stories better, then I would be a fool not to. And so for me, that idea of like, I have all these amazing things that have been here, but they actually become magnificent. They become bigger and better than what they are if I'm just applying them to myself when I get to apply them in somebody else's story.
I love this so much. So listeners, you don't have the picture that I have in my mind. It is November 6th. We are in an auditorium with a lot of women that are feeling a lot of different ways, right? 2024, the election just completed the night before. Many people were up late watching the polls, and Deanna and her two sons, her two wonderful, lovely sons, come into our venue because Deanna's going to keynote for us, right? And she is lovely and gracious and kind. And then she gets on the stage. And Deanna, just as I'm telling the story, tell people how tall you are.
How tall I am?
Yeah, how tall are you?
I am 5 foot, although I try and tell people that I have the personality that's about 6'6".
I love it. Yeah, so I'm 5'3" and I never feel tall. Okay, folks, ever. And so Deanna inspired me in that way. But I want you to know that you're listening to a woman who doesn't speak pretty words. She lives a powerful life. And so when she says that she knows the world through a sense of difference, and that she looks around her and success is what's going on in the room around her, I experienced that live and in person on a day that it could have been hard to energize people that have a difference or to bring them together. Her vibrancy and her words gave us something, helped us remember and grab on to something that is essential about us as women, and that's our purpose in the world. And so, Deanna, as I'm hearing you speak and I'm writing down your answers, I'm like, I saw that, check, I saw that.
Well, thank you so much. I do have to share with you. It was an interesting moment, because my children they're 12 and 16 years old. And so this is really the first election that they can fully remember. And I remember we had a conversation early that morning because I was the keynote speaker for our breakfast session, right? So it was very early in the morning. And we were actually in the hotel room together. And I said to my kids, I said, there are going to be a lot of people who have a lot of different feelings today. And I, as a human being, have a lot of feelings myself. And one of the things that you are going to get to see in real time, you're going to get to be able to witness whether or not your mom's purpose in her life, the way she talks about what her purpose is in her life, the way she wants to show up in her life, if she can do that, not just when it's easy, but also when it's hard. And I want you to hold me accountable to that. And so it was a really, interesting conversation to be able to have with them, to say, yeah, my purpose today, I have been working with these wonderful people at the university. They have a vision for what they want to be able to accomplish today. I know that there are people who are giving up their time, their energy, their resources in order to be in that audience. And I have a job to do. And it's going to be really important, probably more important than it was even if I had done this yesterday, to show up and to do that job. So thank you so much for those kind remarks. But just know, right, like, even in that moment, it was a test and I knew it was a test of whether or not I could really live in my values and live in my purpose.
That's beautiful. Now, was there a defining moment that led you to dedicate your career to helping others find purpose?
I think that for me, that defining moment happens almost on a daily basis. And I would actually say that that's probably one of the greatest blessings of my life and really the work that I get to do, because every day I get the opportunity to see people reach their greatest potential, right? And I get to watch that. I get to support that. I get to encourage that just because of the line of work that I do. My purpose, the way I define it, is to shift power to marginalized communities. And a lot of what that is helping people see the beauty that they have inside of them, the power that they have inside of them. Like, I don't think that I'm not like walking around with a power wand, like, boom, you have power now, boom, you have power now. Like that's not how it works. But what I think I do, right, or really try really hard to do is to help people see what they already have inside of them and then to really leverage that and to really grow that. And so when I think about like, a moment, no, I don't know that there was a moment. I think there was a moment earlier this morning. There was a moment yesterday. There was a moment in the hallway 2 days ago. There was a moment in the grocery store a few days before that, right? Like that every day I'm looking for those opportunities, whether it's in a professional setting or a personal setting, to lift others up, right? And to lift up just how awesome it is that they're in the world.
Through everything that you've been through, what would you say that you're the most proud of?
The most proud of biggest, these are hard questions.
I know. You talk about uplifting women. What is something that you can just really feel empowered and proud of yourself?
I think one thing that brings me a great deal of joy is when somebody comes back and says, hey, I watched you do this thing, or I heard you say this thing, or you showed up for me in this way. And they reflect back on a moment, again, that sort of just helped them, right, reach the next level that they were trying to attain. I think those are the moments, like I tell people this all the time, and I genuinely mean this. I think once you have been able to have the opportunity to help somebody else thrive, I don't know that there's a better feeling than that. Like I think if I'm addicted to anything, I'm addicted to that, right? I'm addicted to being able to be even the littlest part of somebody else's story. So those are my most proud moments. Like I love opening up the newspaper and seeing somebody that I coached who now is the CEO. I love being able to watch somebody come up to me and tell me what they're dreaming about after a keynote or something. And then a few months later to send me a press release that they did it, or, a LinkedIn notification that they moved and tried this thing that they were really afraid of. Like, are you kidding me? Like, to me, that's just like, what? That's amazing. So that's where I get my energy from. And it's really where I get my joy from.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing this thing that happens. Maybe it doesn't happen to you. Maybe I'm the only dark person who's had to grow through this, because I too am a people helper, right? I have lived a life of helping. But you said you want to shift power. And I have to say, right, I'm a professor. I stand in front of a room. One of the first things I had to learn to do was not be the center of attention. And that took me way too long, I think. So what's the difference, or how do you navigate this space as a leader, the difference between shifting power and taking power?
I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to acknowledge power, period. And I think that's one thing that sometimes we're afraid to do. We're afraid to say, because of my title, because of my experience, because of my age, because of the letters that come after my name, right? Because of where I was born, because of whatever fill in the blank gives me power. I don't want to acknowledge that. I want to sort of pretend like it doesn't exist and I'm just the same and this and that. And I think that comes from a lot of different places. I think especially as women, we're taught that this idea that we might have power, like, I don't know how many times we're told to be humble, be humble, be humble. So all of a sudden to say like, situation, here are some places that I have power, is uncomfortable. And so I think one of the number one things is just to acknowledge, like, I'm standing in front of the classroom. I have the title professor. I wrote the, syllabus for this class. I am choosing the books that you are going to read. I'm going to grade you at the end. That gives you power in that situation. I think that's the first step, is just recognizing it. And then I think the second step, and the first step is hard enough as it is, but the second step, and what really translates power from being like I'm holding on to it to I'm dispersing it, is thinking really with intention about with the recognition of the power, what do I actually do that allows me to shift it, or that allows me to push it out in a different kind of way? And so, even in your example, saying like, yeah, I have the power to be in the front of this classroom, and I get to choose what, topics we're going to be covering, but I don't actually have to choose all the books, or I don't have to choose what the final project's going to look like, or I don't have to choose where people are going to sit, or I don't have to choose the volume that they're going to use in the classroom, or I don't have to choose, right? Like, really being cognizant of the fact that, yeah, there are some things that maybe we take for granted that we're supposed to kind of own and do, but we don't necessarily have to. And once you understand that, then the third question is, right? So the second one's challenging your assumptions, but then the third kind of, when you really like take it over the finish line, is where you acknowledge it. Hey, I know I'm the professor in this classroom. Hey, I know that normally what we do is we sit in these kinds of rows, but now what I want to do is I want to actually take a step back, and I want you as the learners in the classroom to tell me what would be the best seating arrangement for you, right? Or what material would really resonate with you? Or what are the questions that you have about this topic that you're not seeing on the syllabus? Because now I have said, I know I'm the professor, I've acknowledged it, right? I've questioned, I've put into question and put on the board all the things that power entails. So I've acknowledged what it is. But now I'm actually opening it back up again. And I think that's where you see the shift. And I will tell you, like, we were saying before, like, what are some of those moments? So one of the things I have an uncanny ability to do, and much to the chagrin, I think, of a lot of people who have worked with me or alongside of me, right, is I will often gently push the people that I love and care about and work with outside of their comfort zone. And so one comment that I will get really frequently is like, Deanna, remember that time that you made me like go and speak in front of 100 people? Or remember that time you made me redo my entire CV and send it out to that organization, like in an hour? Or remember that time you blah, blah, blah. And they feel, right? Like, so they have all these like these stories, and like, I was so uncomfortable. But then it always follows with, I'm so glad you showed me I could do it. I'm so glad you believed in me. I'm so glad you, right? And that's another example of shifting power.
Right.
Because I feel really comfortable standing in front of an audience. Yeah, I can write something pretty quickly. I can make a phone call. I can write. These are things that I've built up the reserves for. And so part of it is also saying, you have it in you too. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to do a little bit so you can show yourself, even more importantly.
Her eyes are sparkling when she says that. She really does she's not only got a gift for it, but she enjoys helping people go to the next level. Am I right? You got a little sparkle there?
Oh, I do. I don't like it, when they give me that first look of like, I'm so mad at you. I can't believe you're doing this. But I really, really appreciate the hugs that come, the next day or a couple of days or a year later, wherever. But I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I myself, I work with a lot of emerging leaders, and I have a lot of friends who are emerging leaders. And something that always comes up is just the feelings of overwhelming and, moving into this next generation. And what advice do you have for people who want to be the change makers, but they feel overwhelmed? Where should they start?
I think, first of all, there's an acknowledgement of what you're feeling. Too often, and this is something that I had to learn for sure, we rush through those emotions. Right. And I think what ended up happening is they just manifest themselves in different kinds of ways. And so that feeling doesn't actually go away. It just gets louder and heavier and harder to kind of move through. And so one of the things that I try and encourage people to do is to really spend some time just being with your feelings. Like, as the kids would say, like, be in your feelings. That's okay. You could be in your feelings. What I try to encourage people to do, though, is to not stay in your feelings. So this is something that I use as a practice just with my own self. I will set an alarm. And sometimes the alarm is like 10 minutes. Sometimes the alarm is 15 minutes. Sometimes the alarm is a whole day or a week, right? Because I know I am really, really in my feelings. But I set a timeline to say, you know what? Tonight, I'm going to open that computer back up again. Or tonight, I'm just going to put the phone on mute. I'm going to put it away. I'm not going to look at it. Or I'm going to take a 15-minute walk. Or I'm going to set the kitchen timer and let everybody in the house know that for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be making up words and I need you to let me be and just let me, work it out. And just acknowledging that I need to have that time in that space. And so I think that's one thing is you're human. Like, we're human. We have feelings. Our feelings are important. Our feelings help us guide, but we can't get stuck in them. And I think that's, the power of setting the timer. So that's one thing I would say. Second thing that I would say is I think that oftentimes the reasons why we get really overwhelmed is because all we can see is the big picture, right? I want to change the world. Whew, that's a huge statement. I want to send an email. Now, that email might be the first step in changing the world. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
So instead of it's okay to see that big picture. I think that gives us vision. But sometimes it can be just too much. And so the other trick that I like to do, especially, in fact, I just did it this afternoon because I have this big thing that's kind of a little bit scary that I'm trying to do. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, this is kind of overwhelming. But what are the next 3 things that I would need to do? Literally the next 3 things I would need to do. One of them is I needed to make a checklist. The other is I needed to write a letter. And the third thing I needed to do was to go and find some old documents that I had created in the past, just find them, right? So I could bring them forward and read them. It's 3 kind of simple things.
Yeah.
The big thing is got my stomach turning, right? And doing flip-flops. But those 3 little things, once I did that, I'm like, oh, and I finished them in 10 minutes. So that gave me the momentum, right? So now I'm like, now that big thing doesn't seem so far away because I've gotten some momentum and I've done the smaller things. So I think the other thing I would just say is make it small, right? Be in your feelings, set a timer, and then if it's too big, make it small.
So you can't just listen to this. You've actually got to do it because, it would be really easy for me if I was somebody that Deanna was working in the push to hug cycle. It would be pretty easy for me to push back, right? I'd be like, she'd push me, I'd push her. We'd be doing this weird handsy, playground thing. And I don't know how to say it. It's almost like she would push me and I would push her back and I would say, oh, well, that's easy for you to say, right? It's but Deanna models this thing that is kind of annoying and freeing at the same time, which is these small steps. because I am a big picture girl all the time, and I want everyone to agree with me on the big picture. And I want to have the coalition all moving forward together, like the Rustin movie. I want it to be, that one scene, not all the scenes that it took to get there. And I really think Deanna models in a powerful way this call to action of just do, break down. Then right, and it's almost like you want to say, "Oh, that's too easy." Does anybody ever say that to you?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, you talk about like the pushback. One of the biggest pieces of pushback I get is like, "But that's so easy. So doesn't this have to be like a complicated 10-page plan with 45 steps?" And this and that. I'm like, yeah, it does. And when you look back on it and you write the story, it will be. But right now, it's just this next step. Yeah. It's really just this one thing. And I have to tell you, like, there are so many things in my life. And so this is not like me pretending, right? I just told you, within the last hour, right? These things, these big things, people are like, I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you did this. I'm like, I can't believe it's there. Because that wasn't necessarily what I set out to do. I set out to do this one thing. Right. And often it like starts with a list, or it starts with like an email, or it starts with reading an article, or it starts with listening to a great podcast, or it starts with something so tiny. So then when you trace it back, you're like, oh yeah, it was that. It was that. And I can give you so many examples of this, but that's the reality. And I think that one of the things that I get agitated about is that when leaders talk, and often because they don't have enough time, it's not like from a malicious space, but they don't have enough time. The questions are framed. You just talk about getting to the top of the mountain and what the top of the mountain is. But you don't talk about the fact that the first thing you did was kick some rocks. You don't talk about the first thing that you did was you had to like map quest it. I don't even know if we use that word, but you had to like figure out what the coordinates were, or that you had to wait a little bit because the sun wasn't up. Like we don't talk about the stuff that happens when you get to the top of that mountain.
Right. You just make it look so effortless. They think it's so easy.
The two of us would love to we want to go on your retreat if only we could. If only
we'd love to have you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So that said, I know Serena wants to ask you one last question. And I just want to say thanks for being my Kicking the Rocks mentor. That's invaluable.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up here, what's the one thing you'd like to ask everyone listening to this podcast to do to further unleash women?
I would ask all of you to really just stop for 1 second and give yourself a gift and give the rest of us a gift. And really reflect on the question, what is it that you are uniquely positioned to do in the world? Because the reality is, and I believe this to my core, there is something that I was put here to do in a way that I was put here to do it, in a time in which I was put here to do it, that is singular to me. But there's the same thing to every single person who is living right now. And I actually think that this is my theory of change. I think that all of the big, hairy, awful, hard, things, right, that exist in the world, I actually think that every single one of them is solvable. I think there's a solution right now. Not necessarily that we need more money, although that always helps, right? Not necessarily that we need more laws, although that's important too. Not necessarily that. The thing that's separating us from having those solutions is the fact that there are people walking around with those purposes who have not given themselves permission to live in them. And to me, that's really scary. Right? Because we all, the one thing that we all have in common is we have a limited amount of steps that we are going to take. So while we're here, the more we can live in that purpose, the more we can do that thing that we are uniquely positioned to do, the better we leave the world. And so that's my ask. That's my ask all over the place, right? It's the ask that I have of myself on a daily basis too. Like, what is it that I'm uniquely positioned to do with this day, this time, these talents, these people, these resources, this mindset that I am uniquely positioned to do? And how can I live in that most fully?
I love that. The legend is true. You're such an inspiration.
Yeah.
You're so sweet.
Thanks so much for giving us your time today. It was really exciting to have you on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was so much fun to be with you all. I hope that everyone listening gets an opportunity to learn so much from the two of you and also all of the amazing guests that you've lined up for the podcast. Thanks for letting me join.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you for joining us for our 4th series on leading change in education and community engagement. We hope that these stories inspire you to create impact in your own community.
As Maya Angelou wisely said, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Let's take that with us into our work and our lives.
Be sure to tune in to our next series where we'll continue to explore powerful stories and innovative ideas.
Until then, keep inspiring, keep innovating, and keep leading change.